Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're doing something a little different. We are treating this exactly like a professional financial planning session. Whether you're a total beginner trying to just get a grip on your own finances, or maybe you're trying to help a family member stabilize theirs, we're going to use a really compelling, real-world case study to guide us through this. We're going to walk through exactly how to move from emergency financial triage all the way to long-term health. And to do this, we're using advice and data drawn from a very candid public discussion as well as official resources from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
So imagine this for a second. What would you do if you were 55 years old and had absolutely no retirement savings? That is the exact, frankly terrifying prompt posted by a young medical student who is desperately seeking advice for their mother. You can just feel the emotional weight and the urgency of that situation, right? The mother is an immigrant, she's a nurse, and according to the poster, she grew up in a culture where traditional retirement accounts simply weren't a thing. You know, kids were the retirement plan.
But here is where the situation gets kind of perplexing. $100,000. That's the mother's current annual income. Now, it's a recent development. For most of the poster's childhood, her income hovered somewhere between $40,000 and $65,000. But right now, today, she's making a six-figure salary. So how does a six-figure salary translate to zero savings? Well, she's living completely paycheck to paycheck. It's this wild paradox that so many people face, where a higher income just doesn't automatically equal wealth if the right financial systems aren't actually in place.
All right, as your fiduciary today, here's our itinerary. First, we'll do a financial reality check. Second, a step-by-step budget audit. Third, building an emergency fund. Fourth, securing long-term retirement. And finally, family support and sacrifices. Okay, let's dive into part one, the financial reality check, diagnosing the status. One really insightful commenter in the original discussion hit the nail on the head. They said, retirement is a number, not an age. Society always tells us we just stop working at 65, right? But the math tells us we stop working when our assets can actually replace our income. So the hard truth for this 55-year-old mother is that she's almost certainly going to need to work well past that traditional age of 65.
Let's open up the complete client file we've put together here. She's a 55-year-old nurse making $100K but zero retirement savings. Crucially, we also learned she very recently lost the little savings she did have to a scam. On top of that, she's sending remittances back to her home country and she's supporting an elderly grandmother. Look, this isn't just reckless spending, okay? This is the reality for so many first-generation wealth builders who are carrying these incredibly heavy familial obligations. But the drain has to be plugged.
Which brings us to part two, the step-by-step budget audit.
This right here is the financial triage required to stop the bleeding. If you're doing this at home, here is your foundational template. Step 1, track every single cent of monthly income. Step 2, audit all outgoing expenses. You can use budgeting apps, a simple spreadsheet, or even the classic cash envelope method. It doesn't matter, but you have to categorize every single transaction. And yes, printing out bank statements and actually facing your spending habits is about as fun as a root canal. I know, but it's literally the only way to see exactly how much is going to overseas remittances versus daily living. And then, step 3, find the leftover cash. The consensus from the financial community is absolutely clear. If you don't track every dollar, a $100,000 salary will simply disappear into thin air. You've got to prioritize high-interest debt if you have it and aggressively cut all non-essential spending. So for her, she needs to cut that discretionary spending immediately and start saving at least 15 to 20% of her income. That means she has to learn to live off, say, $75,000 or $80,000 a year, and just pretend the rest doesn't even exist. It takes a massive mindset shift, but doing something, even if it feels like you're getting a late start, is always mathematically better than doing nothing at all.
Let's move to part 3, building an emergency fund. This is all about building stability. Because once the budget audit stops the bleeding, we have to stabilize. Because let's face it, life is inevitably going to throw another curveball. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau officially defines an emergency fund as a cash reserve that's for unplanned expenses or financial emergencies. Note that word unplanned. This is not money for a vacation, it's not for a new car. It is a dedicated liquid cash reserve sitting in a safe, boring account. For a beginner, aiming to save even 1 month of essential living expenses is a massive first milestone, and then you eventually build that up to 3 to 6 months.
Think about it. Without an emergency fund, you are entirely vulnerable.
Remember, our client recently lost her savings to a scam. If she'd had a structured, secure emergency fund and the financial literacy to protect it, she would have had a real buffer against that devastating blow. With an emergency fund, you actually achieve financial resilience. You aren't forced to immediately rely on your kids if you miss a week of work due to health issues, and you finally gain some much-needed peace of mind.
Now, what's really interesting about this next phase, Part 4, securing long-term retirement.
If you're feeling like it's too late, it's really not. One advisor in our source thread put it so eloquently. The best time to start investing was yesterday, the next best time is today. It's incredibly easy to feel defeated at 55. But hey, 55 is not 75. She still has time to let compound interest do a chunk of the heavy lifting if she takes immediate action right now.
So here is her long-term playbook. First, if her employer offers a 401k match, she has to contribute enough to capture it, because that is literally free money. Second, open an IRA. Now pay close attention to this part. The consensus suggests a traditional IRA might actually be better than a Roth for her right now. Why? Because at 100K, she's currently in a 22% tax bracket. When she retires, her income will be much lower, which puts her in a lower tax bracket. So a traditional IRA gives her a tax break today, right when she needs it most. Third, she needs to get on SSA.gov to see her actual Social Security estimates. And fourth, this one gets ignored all the time in financial talks, she must maintain her physical health. As a nurse, her physical capability is what directly dictates her ability to extend those working years.
Let's map out this timeline so it's crystal clear. Right now, at age 55, she starts aggressive 15 to 20% savings. At 65, she hits Medicare eligibility, which is huge for helping with healthcare costs. But she does need to keep working to build that nest egg. At 67, she hits her full Social Security age. But the absolute most powerful lever she has left to pull is waiting until age 70. Delaying Social Security until 70 guarantees the maximum possible monthly payout, and that is going to be the absolute bedrock of her retirement income. Finally, let's look at Part 5, family support and sacrifices. Look, sometimes, despite all the budgeting and saving, the math simply doesn't add up for full, luxurious independence. It just doesn't. We have to look at safety nets outside of Wall Street. The community advised the poster to eventually contact their local area agency on aging and to start researching low-income senior housing. Another massive lever, relocating to a lower cost of living area. Trying to keep a high cost of living lifestyle on a fixed income is just a recipe for disaster. And lastly, for the poster who's heading off to medical school, they might look into building an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, like a backyard cottage or an in-law suite on their future property. And that brings us to this profound, really emotional realization from the medical student who originally posted this inquiry. Faced with all this math and the harsh reality, they wrote, "I'm not okay with my mother being destitute, so I will do what I have to do." It's a heavy realization that both culturally and practically, they are the ultimate retirement plan. But by having this session, actually doing the budget audit, and utilizing government resources, they can minimize that burden and create a truly dignified plan for both of them.
So what does this all mean for you? It leaves us with a pretty critical question. Are you on track for retirement, or is it time to sit down and do your own budget audit today? Seriously, don't wait until you're 55 to find out where your money's going. Start tracking your income, build that emergency fund, and take control of your financial reality right now. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to take that very first step today.